overstepping in some places. But real interesting. I was sitting. We were there making this trackway, measuring it and making the casts, and the traffic was going back and forth. And one of these little mules pulls up with a man and a woman in it. The gentleman's sitting there watching this for a few minutes, and finally he kind of calls over. He says, "Excuse me, I just have to ask, what the hell are you doing?" So I pulled one of the casts up and walked over. He immediately grabs his smartphone and, "Can I take a picture?" And he was really fascinated. Well, and I asked him, because the thought is, if this is a joke, it'd probably have to be a local person. And I said, it turned out he lived just a quarter mile down the road. And I said, well, it's been 10 days since these were first reported to us. Have you heard anything? Has there been any claim to hoaxing? And he hadn't heard a word about it. So we were trying to get in touch with the District Forest Service, but weren't able to do it at that particular time. Here's another quick one. Some of you may have seen the episode of Finding Bigfoot. Let's see, I'll find the pad here. Oh, no, that's not it. What's the trick to the finger pad? Yeah. Oh, I do. Okay, thank you. Well, let me see if I can. No. Where's the lady that owns the computer? My fingers. How do you get the cursor to? Well, I'm trying to. If you go over the picture, it'll bring up the taskbar. Oh, okay. Oh, I see. All right. Maybe I can. Is it going to? Do we need to?
I didn't bring it back.
Well, can we? Can we just close that and then go to the screen?
Which hand wins? Which hand wins?
Thank you so much. Okay, now this way you get to see. We had a sighting just outside of Pocatello, or there's a claim of a sighting. There were some high schoolers who were doing their environmental science course was up in a canyon just outside of town, and doing some field experiments. And they had a video camera, and were doing some erosional study or something. It was in the spring. And suddenly, on the opposite side of the canyon, the young lady in the group said, "Hey, there's a dude watching us." And up on the hillside was a dark figure, and the fellow with the camera, who was quite adept with it, whirled around, and he zoomed right in on it. And just as soon as it realized it was spotted, it turned apparently and went into the forest. And this is just the brief segment after he zoomed in. Oh, Get it here? No? Almost had it. Okay. There we go. Right there. Maybe.
Now what?
Well, I don't know. It's just, let's see if it'll play. It may or may not play.
Bigfoot type not available.
Oh. Okay, shucks. All right.
What are you trying to do?
Well, this, it's just an embedded little quick time that it should, usually on my computer, you can just hit play. Okay, all right. Oh well, should have used my computer. What you see here, well, first of all, let's focus on the footprint then first. It immediately disappeared. This dark that you're seeing right in here is it. It was standing right about here, and then it turned and it went down through this through the brambles that were hawthorn bushes, and then over the brink into the dark forest there. A couple of the intrepid boys climbed up there and snapped off a picture of the clearest footprint. And it looks a little bit odd at first glance, or at least I thought so, and then I started comparing it, and what I was struck by, and hadn't always realized, hadn't really realized as thoroughly as I should have, is that because of that mobility of the midfoot there, yeah, I've just about killed the batteries on this one too, I think. There we go. Right there, the foot is capable of a much greater degree of pronation and supination. And in pronation, even though this is the imprint of a right foot, this is the inside edge of the foot, it's convex, and the outside edge is concave. And that's exactly what we see here. I mean, there's a slight, you can see the toe rose slanting slightly here, and it's particularly concave on the outside edge of the foot, almost making like the toes are opposite of what they should be, but not. And in fact, the comparison between these two is remarkable. Remarkably similar in length and proportion and disposition of the toes and degree of pronation. Now here you can see a blow up of the still, and I'm sorry I can't share with you the full effect of the video itself, but here's this is the arm, and it clearly is swinging, and we were all struck by the remarkable resemblance to the size and shape and proportion of the Patterson-Gilman subject. Now, we climbed up, after I took Brandon Tennant, who lives in Pocatello as well, and I climbed up on the far side. He went down to the site where the kids were located, had his laptop with the film looped, and then had the same camera, and with two-way radios, we had me move around until I was in the right position to approximate it. So here you can see, there's that arm and the leg there, and so I put this in just because it's so obscured, it's really hard to get a sense of the size of it. But here's the figure with the arm overlaid so that it's almost the exact same shape and size there. And here I am, I was wearing a big bright red parka, down parka, so that I'd stand out better in the shadows and everything. And you can see, it was big. I mean, I'm here, the ground level is lined up. I'm back a few feet, and so standing a little too high. But just the comparison in the girth. Now the rumor was that this was a hoax, and that one of the friends of the group was responsible, and his name was Targ. And I actually gave a presentation to a visiting high school group. We have students who come in to visit the cadaver lab, and they have a demonstration. That are students that are in the AP, the Advanced Placement Anatomy Physiology group. One of these, and then so if the groups are large enough, we have to split them. And while the one group is waiting, they get a presentation from a member of the faculty. And my lectures on Sasquatch are always popular and requested. So I was presenting to this group and showed them this, and then asked them, how many of you have heard this story? And a bunch of hands went up, and I said, how many of you heard that it was a hoax? And quite a few hands stayed up. And I said, okay, who is it then? And as I expected, they said, it's Targ. I said, well, how tall is Targ? I hadn't shown them this picture yet, I just showed them the other. I said, how tall is Targ? You know, is he as tall as I am? Oh, no, he's not 5'5". Is he as heavy as I am? No. I said, could he look as heavy as I am if he put on, because the story was he put on about 5 sweatshirts and then a hoodie over his head, and then just put his head down. And they go, well, and I showed them this picture, and I says, whatever it was this big, and here I am standing next to it. So you think Tartan could, the other hands went down. So I don't know, you know, it's one of those things, so what? Even if it is true, it's not going to convince anybody, it's not going to tip the scale. You know, the Patterson-Gimlin film has set the bar so high, and yet we're still debating that all of these other, you know, Facebook Find Bigfoot snippets are interesting, but they're not going to make a persuasive case. What about physical evidence? We have stuff like hair, and the hair attributed to Sasquatch, and I'm indebted for this figure to Henner Fehrenbach. But Henner has shown that there is a collection of hairs out there that have a distinctive suite of characteristics that distinguish them from other wildlife hair. So you can see a black bear, a chimp, and a human. And the human has a lot of variation. That's one type of human hair. Some human hair looks very similar to the Sasquatch in that it lacks that core. Now in the chimp it's hard to see the core because the shaft has so much pigment. Chimps have such dark hair that you can't hardly see that black medulla down here. Humans, it's variable. This one has kind of an interrupted medulla, but it's typically when it's present, it's of a thinner, much thinner size than it is, say, in the black bear. So there's a Sasquatch here. Some of you have asked me about the MN.B.R.T study, and I only had negative things to say about it, and so I'm not going to take the time, but I'm much more hopeful about the Oxford-Lucerne study. Brian Sykes, who's an Oxford human geneticist. I had the opportunity to spend the afternoon with him in Salt Lake City when he was traveling through on a book signing tour for his latest book called DNA USA. He's known for a number of books. You may have seen The 7 Daughters of Eve, which talk about the major genetic groups of humans across Eurasia. He's also led the team that studied the Iceman, this frozen mummy that was found up in the Alps. He also studied the Cheddarman, the oldest skeleton on the British Isles. It dates to about 12,000 years ago. They did a survey, a sampling of individuals in that community, Cheddar, and the village in England, something in surrounding areas, and they found an individual who is 99.99% certainly a direct lineal descendant of this individual, which is pretty fascinating when you contemplate it. You know, we are in the past, have been in the past, a rather sedentary species. You know, sure, as a group, as a species, I should say, we've been sedentary in sedentary populations. As a species, we've spread and migrated, moved here and there and everywhere. But a lot of people spend generation after generation after generation in the same place. Anyway, so we've got our fingers crossed. Dr. Sykes has 30 samples of hair, most of which are from North America. He has some from Bhutan, the Himalayas, and some from Russia, supposedly from the Almas. But what is Sasquatch? I mean, where does it fit in the family tree of primates? Well, again, one popular hypothesis, and these are working hypotheses, is that it's a descendant of Gigantopithecus. We're not absolutely sure that Gigantopithecus is that closely related to the orangutan. If it is, it's quite distantly, but it could have some affinities to the African apes. Both the African apes and the orangutans evolved in Asia, and the African apes are more recent immigrants into Africa. Some have argued, now the advantage of that, the appeal of that, is you've got a creature that's the right size in the right place at the right time. But we don't know for sure what its postcranial anatomy, what its skeletal anatomy was like. We have just fragmentary remains of its jaws and teeth. So we don't know for sure if it was bipedal. That's a pretty critical factor. Some have argued that that alone would link it to the hominid family tree. And of course some have argued that Sasquatch are very human-like. I'm not convinced of that proposition at all. But so that if they are hominids, they had to have diverged very, very early on, probably from the robust Australopithecine lineage, for example, before the emergence of Homo. And there are remarkable resemblances. The robust Australopithecines are appealing because of the megadontia of the pig, the durophagus, we say, durophagus, eating a diet of tough, resistant food items, adaptations of its jaws and teeth, that in proportion are remarkably similar to the descriptions of Sasquatch. I gave it the example of that distance between the nose and the lips. But if you, I don't think I've included it here, no, if you compare this skull, for example, to a close-up of the Patterson-Gimlin film subject, remarkably similar. I mean, it's striking how similar in proportion, how the landmarks of that skull line up. Now, what would have been the inspiration for a giant ape in 1967? What ape haunted the silver screen of Hollywood back then?
King Kong.
King Kong. King Kong was based on a gorilla that has a very different cranium, jutting jaws and big canine teeth. And those canines mean that when the jaws bite, the movement is restricted mostly to an up and down movement, open and close, open and close. When you get rid of the canines, not get rid of them, shorten the canines, blunt them, then the teeth can grind as well as bite. And the emphasis is on the post-canine teeth with hugely large premolars and molars. Now, we haven't had anyone with the privilege of peering into the mouth of Bigfoot, but remember the Bucquois depiction. I pointed out the even teeth, the lack of projecting canines. You know, and usually eyewitnesses don't. I mean, I don't know of any credible witnesses that describe large eye teeth. Now, that adaptation was shared by Gigantopithecus, evolved independently, but it had deep, deep jaws. We don't know much about the cranium. This is all speculative. But either one of these could be. So this one's the right size in the right place at the right time, but we don't know if it's bipedal. This one's bipedal, but it's clear over here in Africa. And you know, to suggest it made it all the way across without leaving any record would have been a bit far-fetched. But then the hobbit was found, Homo floresiensis, on the island of Flores down here in Indonesia. And it's almost certainly not Homo. If it is, it's an extremely early Homo. It has a brain that's smaller than that of a chimpanzee. The argument made for the very primitive tools that it supposedly had being associated is very weak, as was the case for fire. Very poorly written article in Nature. Very poorly written argument, I should say. Poorly constructed argument. But the point is, so it's either a late Australopithecine or very early Homo, but how did it get out there? You know, it didn't have any connection to Homo erectus, as was initially thought. I mean, that was the most reasonable thought, because that was the only other hominid we have a record of out there. Well, if it's possible that an Australopithecine made it down to the island of Flores, it's possible that one spread on into Asia, attained more gigantic size during the Pleistocene, and was the source of Sasquatch crossing the Bering Land Bridge. Now, okay, yeah, I'll leave it there. All right. Now, this idea of hominids, relic hominids and hominoids, persisting at the present is gaining some traction. Two factors are involved here. One is that with every passing year we have more descriptions of new species of hominid added to that family tree. So the tree's getting bushier and bushier and bushier. At one time there was the notion that hominid evolution involved a very specialized adaptation, a very elite or a restricted niche. There could be only one species occupying the hominid niche. And so the evolution of humans was seen as kind of a linear process of one species giving rise and being succeeded by another. Now we know that at any given time in the past there were numerous contemporaneous species. The single species hypothesis has been long abandoned. The second factor is that with new discoveries we keep finding these lineages persist much more recently than has ever been recognized before. So for example, I mentioned Homo floresiensis. The youngest skeletons of that species are dated to only 13,000 years ago. Some specimens of Homo erectus on the isolated islands of Southeast Asia are dated to as recent as 25,000 years ago. I had the privilege of examining a specimen that has not been fully described, but the preliminary dates, it is attributed to Homo heidelbergensis, the species that immediately preceded us,